There's something gutting about watching your child slowly become someone who looks at you not with love, but with calculation, like they're doing the math on how much you're worth and how fast you'll disappear. This isn't a revenge story with screaming and slamming doors. This is about what happens when a mother realizes she's been financing her own erasure. One check, one sacrifice at a time. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. The house was quiet. Too quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge and the ticking of the old wall clock above the pantry. I put the kettle on the stove and reached for my favorite mug. It was faded now, but still bore the roses Albert had painted on it himself, my late husband. He gave it to me on our 20th anniversary. That was 18 years ago. He died at his desk in the tax office where we both worked. Just like that, gone. I was 44 then, and I made up my mind that day I'd never remarry. Not because I didn't want companionship, but because I had one man in my life who respected me as a partner, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less again. The kettle whistled. I poured hot water over the black tea leaves, no sugar, no milk, just strong the way I liked it. I sat down at the kitchen table. That table had seen everything. Baby bottles, broken hearts, birthday cakes, divorce papers. Now it held a small stack of envelopes. Bills, mostly, and a bank statement. I sorted them like I always did. Electricity, $120. Gas, $80. Internet and cable, $150. I barely used the cable, but the kids did. The rest was for my son and the grandchildren. I opened the bank statement. My pension had arrived, $1,400, like clockwork. But $800 went straight to the mortgage. That house, the one we bought together, the one my son said would only be temporary until he got back on his feet after the divorce. That was 4 years ago. He was 31 back then, with 2 kids and nowhere to go after his wife left. I agreed to co-sign the mortgage because his salary alone wouldn't qualify him. I dipped into my savings, $45,000, gone in a blink, for the down payment. I told myself, he's a good father. He just needs a fresh start. And I believed that. He promised, just a year or 2, Mom. I'll take over the mortgage. You'll relax, enjoy retirement. Well, 4 years passed. I paid every month because he never could. His job as a delivery driver barely covered the groceries and his car payment, he said. I didn't want the kids, my grandchildren, to feel the stress, so I covered what he couldn't, quietly, month after month. I didn't live large. I clipped coupons. I wore shoes until the soles gave out. I hadn't had a vacation in over a decade, but every time my son came into the kitchen with that tired look on his face saying, Mom, can we talk? I already knew what was coming. He needed a few hundred for the kids' school supplies. Then the car broke down. Then the heater needed fixing. Then there was a field trip. Then braces. Then therapy. Then a new laptop. It was always something. The worst part? He never asked me how I was doing. Not once. To be fair, the kids were sweet. The little one, Gracie, always hugged me goodnight and said, Grandma, you're my favorite person. That melted me every time. The older boy, Ryan, was quieter but polite. He called me ma'am, even though I told him not to. They were good kids, but kids don't raise themselves. I cooked, I cleaned, I watched them after school. I made sure they had snacks and did their homework. I turned the thermostat down when no one was home to save money. I budgeted every penny like I was still living in 1987. But lately, something had changed. My son had become colder, more short-tempered, as if my presence was a burden, an obstacle in his new life he was trying to build. Last week, when I suggested we split some of the bills evenly, he rolled his eyes and said, You live here for free, Mom. You don't get to make decisions. I didn't say anything. I just went back to folding the laundry. But something cracked inside me that day, a kind of silence louder than screaming. It wasn't about the money, it was about the erasure, about being made to feel like my decades of sacrifice had expired, like I was past my usefulness and the clock was ticking on when I'd be dealt with. I took a sip of tea, bitter, just the way I liked it. I glanced out the window. Across the street, Mr. Humphrey was watering his front lawn. Same time every day, routine, order, peace. His wife passed away 2 years ago. We never talked much, just a wave here and there. But I envied the quiet in his house, the respect he gave his space. I hadn't had that kind of quiet in a long time. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the neighbor's roofline, I heard my son's key in the door. The kids came in first, backpacks thrown on the floor, shoes kicked off. Then he walked in behind them, dropping his phone on the counter without a word. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, I said. He grunted. Later, as we ate, he mentioned something about a bill being higher than expected. Then he looked at me and said, "Maybe it's time we talk about your contribution to the household. I mean, I work full time. You're retired. You're here all day. We need to be realistic." I blinked. Realistic. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. That word echoed in my mind. Realistic, as if what I'd been doing all these years was fantasy. As if my role, my effort, my care wasn't real enough to count anymore. Something in me began to change. And I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. It happened on a Tuesday. You never expect those moments, the ones that change everything, to come on a plain old Tuesday, in the middle of folding towels or reheating leftovers. But that's exactly how it happened. Dinner was finished. The kids were upstairs arguing over the remote, and I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing off plates. My back was aching, but I didn't say anything. I rarely did. My son walked in, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and leaned against the counter. He didn't look at me right away, just stared into the living room like he was searching for the right words. Then he cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." Every woman over 60 knows what that means. Nothing good ever follows "we need to talk." I turned off the water, dried my hands, and sat down. He didn't. He stayed standing like a manager about to fire someone. He took a sip of beer. Then, calmly, too calmly, he said, "I've been thinking about the finances." I nodded slowly. "Okay. I feel like things are getting out of balance. You know? I work full-time, I cover groceries, gas, car stuff, the kids, and, well, you don't really contribute directly." My mouth was open, but I hadn't said a word yet. He went on, "You're here, in the house, all day, but you're not paying rent, or for food, and it's not really fair anymore." Fair, that word again. I took a deep breath. "I pay the mortgage. I pay the electric, the gas, the internet. I bought this house with you, remember?" He waved a hand, brushing that off like it was a minor detail. "That was 4 years ago. You've been living here since then rent-free." Rent-free? That was when the room began to blur at the edges, not because I was crying, but because my blood pressure must have spiked. I was stunned. I had cooked every meal in that kitchen, folded every sock in that laundry room, and now I was a tenant. "I just think," he continued, "it makes more sense if I manage the money. All of it." I stared at him. He didn't blink. "I mean, we could set it up so your pension goes straight into my account. I'll handle the mortgage, the bills, groceries, everything. You'll still get something, like $100 a month for personal stuff." He said it like he was offering me a deal, like I should be grateful. "I'd be taking care of the whole household," he added. "You just wouldn't have to stress." I looked down at my hands. The fingers were stiff. My knuckles, swollen from arthritis, looked older than the rest of me. "I don't need you to take care of me," I said quietly. "I've been taking care of this family for years." His voice sharpened. "And now it's time to be realistic, Mom. You're retired. You don't have the same financial burdens I do." "No," I said. "I just have you." He flinched, just slightly, but it was there. "You have to stop living like this is your house," he muttered. We co-signed. "It's mine too." I stood up. That was the first time in my life that I looked at my son and felt something that wasn't love. It was a stranger standing in front of me. You know, it's funny. They never scream when they cut you the deepest. It's the soft, calm tones that leave the biggest scars, because they believe every word they say. He really believed I was a burden. He really believed I owed him everything I had left, What would you do if your own child, someone you raised, fed, clothed, protected, told you to hand over your pension and live off pocket money? Would you stay and beg for space in your own home, or walk away with your dignity intact? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious how you'd handle a situation like this. That night, I didn't sleep, not even for 5 minutes. I stared at the ceiling. I replayed every memory of him as a baby, his first steps, the time he broke his arm falling off the slide and begged me not to cry, the science fair project we stayed up all night building, the way he used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, and now he wanted to control my pension. I got out of bed around 3 a.m., sat in the living room, no TV, just silence. I don't know how long I sat there, but when the sky turned pale blue, I made up my mind. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't try to convince him of my worth. No. I'd do what every smart woman learns to do when she's finally had enough. I'd disappear. I left on a Wednesday morning. No suitcase banging down the stairs. No dramatic goodbye. Just quiet packing in a house that no longer felt like mine. I woke up before anyone else. The kitchen was still dark, but I didn't bother turning on the light. I knew every inch of that place. I had wiped those counters, swept those floors, washed those windows for 4 straight years. Longer, really. The house still smelled faintly of last night's casserole. I made a cup of tea like I always did. Same mug, same teaspoon. But this time I didn't sit down. I stood at the sink watching the sky go from deep blue to ash gray. Then I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the old brown suitcase I hadn't used since Albert's funeral. I packed slow. 3 dresses, 1 warm sweater, my meds, toothbrush, a framed photo of my late husband, a paperback novel I'd been halfway through for 6 months. I didn't pack anything fancy, no jewelry, no makeup, just what I needed. When I zipped it shut, I felt something shift in me. Not sadness, not guilt, just a kind of stillness, like I was finally done. I took one last look around the room. My son was still asleep, most likely. The kids, too. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. My absence would speak louder than anything I could ever write. I walked out the front door just after 7 a.m. The birds were chirping. The dew was still on the grass. Across the street, old Mr. Humphrey was watering his lawn like he did every morning, slow and steady. He looked up, surprised to see me with a suitcase. I gave him a little nod. He put down the hose. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I said, stepping onto his porch. "Can I come in?" He didn't hesitate. Of course. Mr. Humphrey's house was quiet. Not the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, the kind that feels like a soft blanket. Nothing was out of place. He had 2 chairs in the living room, a worn rug, and a tiny table with a lamp. There were no toys on the floor, no dirty socks under the couch, no yelling, no tension, just peace. He made tea, real tea from leaves, not bags, and we sat there for a while, sipping in silence. "I left," I said after a while. He nodded like he already knew. "It was time," I added. "It always is," he replied. That afternoon, I pulled out my phone for the first time since I left and started making the calls. Bank first. "Hello, this is Patricia Reynolds. I'm a co-signer on a mortgage loan and I'd like to cancel the automatic withdrawals from my account." The woman on the line was polite but cautious. "You understand that by canceling, the primary borrower will be fully responsible for future payments?" "I understand." "Any particular reason?" "Yes," I said. "Because I can." Then came the utilities. Electric, gas, internet. One by one, I shut them down. Not out of spite, but because they were in my name, paid with my money, and I no longer lived there. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. Not vindicated, not triumphant. Just free. The phone rang that evening. Of course it did. My son. I didn't answer. The second call came 5 minutes later. Then a text. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Another. The bank called. "The mortgage didn't go through. Did you change something?" Then, "Mom, this isn't funny. Call me." I turned the phone off. That night, I slept in a twin bed in Humphrey's spare room, under a crocheted blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. I slept like a child, no slamming doors, no guilt trips, no one asking for money, no one measuring my value by my bank balance. The next morning, over scrambled eggs and coffee, I turned my phone back on. 10 missed calls, 6 more texts, all from him. I finally answered the next one. "Mom?" His voice was sharp with panic. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm safe," I said calmly. "That's all you need to know." "What's going on? The mortgage bounced, the electric company called, the internet's off. What did you do?" "I stopped paying for things that aren't mine anymore." "You can't do that." "I already did." He was breathing hard, like he was pacing. "You don't understand. I don't have enough to cover everything." "You should have thought about that before you tried to take control of my money." There was a long silence. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to keep things organized. Make it easier." "For who, you?" More silence. "What am I supposed to tell the kids?" He finally said. "Tell them the truth, that their grandmother doesn't live in that house anymore. You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being clear." And I hung up. You see, people don't notice your worth when you're always available, always sacrificing, always giving. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to leave. 3 days had passed since she left. The first morning, I thought she was just blowing off steam, maybe staying at a friend's for the night. She didn't leave a note, but Mom's always been the kind of person who needed space when she felt overwhelmed. But by the second morning, when the mortgage payment bounced and the electricity company called about the overdue bill, I started to panic. I tried to call. No answer. I texted. Still nothing. By the third day, the internet was cut off, and the kids noticed. "Why won't the Wi-Fi work?" Ryan asked, holding his laptop up like it was broken. I mumbled something about technical issues, but I could already feel the lie sitting in my throat. Gracie, my youngest, asked where Grandma was. Again, I said she was visiting a friend. She frowned. "Grandma doesn't have friends. Only us." That hit me harder than I expected. I sat at the kitchen table that night with my calculator, a stack of unopened bills, and an uneasy feeling in my chest. For the first time in years, I had to look at our finances without her covering the gaps. Mortgage and $800 electric, $120 gas, $85 internet, $150 groceries, at least $200. Kids' school needs, gas for the car, clothes, it all added up. My take-home pay was around $2,400 a month after taxes. But without her covering the mortgage and utilities, I was nearly $600 short, and that's without even touching the food budget. How the hell had I not noticed? Because Mom never said a word. She just paid it, quietly, like breathing. And I let her. The worst part? I remembered rolling my eyes when she once asked me to split the electric bill. I called my ex-wife, hoping she might help, just until I figured things out. She laughed. "I already give you child support. Ask your mother." "Oh, wait." Click. Then I tried my best friend Kyle. No answer. I didn't blame him. He had his own problems. Everyone did. I texted Mom again. "Please come home. We need to talk." Nothing. No dots. No red receipt. Just silence. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house felt hollow without her. The kids noticed too. There were no warm muffins on the counter after school, no laundry magically folded and stacked, no quiet humming from the kitchen while she wiped down the counters. Gracie cried because she couldn't find her favorite socks. Ryan asked, "Why didn't you pay the internet, Dad?" I couldn't lie. "Because Grandma usually does." He looked at me, surprised. "But you work." "Yeah," I said, rubbing my face. "I do." He didn't say anything after that. He just went back to his room and shut the door. The next morning, I stood at the sink, her spot, and just stared at the empty table. I'd always seen her there, every morning, drinking tea, reading some tattered novel, sorting bills, humming old songs from before I was even born. Now the space was bare. I grabbed my phone again, dialed, prayed she'd pick up. She did. "Mom?" I said, more breath than voice. "I'm here," she said. Calm, steady, not warm, not angry, just distant. "Where are you?" "I'm safe. The mortgage didn't go through, neither did the gas or the internet. Did you?" "Yes," she said. "I stopped paying." My throat dried. "Why?" "Because I don't live there anymore, and because I'm not responsible for your life." "Mom, I didn't mean what I said the other night. I was frustrated, tired." "You said you wanted control of my money," she replied. "You said I was living off you. You said this wasn't my house." I closed my eyes. "I was wrong. I know. I thought if I managed everything, it would make things easier." "For who?" she asked again, like she had before. I didn't answer. "I've always been here," she continued, "helping, quietly. I never asked for thanks, but I thought maybe you'd notice." "I did notice," I whispered. "No, you didn't," she said. "And that's okay. It's not your job to worship your mother, but it's also not my job to be your silent sponsor." My eyes burned. She wasn't yelling. That's what made it worse. "Please," I said, "just come back. The kids miss you." "I miss them too." "Then come home." "I can't come back to a place where I'm not seen." There was a long silence. I could hear my own breath. Then she added softly, "You didn't kill me, son, but you killed the version of me that still believed you saw me as your mother." I couldn't speak. That sentence landed like a stone in my chest. "I'm not punishing you," she asserted. "I'm just done pretending." "Are you coming back?" "I don't know. Maybe, when I know I'll be treated like a person, not an expense." The line clicked off. That night, Gracie asked again, "When's Grandma coming home?" I didn't have an answer, and for the first time, I knew how that felt. It had been 1 week since I left, 7 days since I'd walked out of that house and into the unfamiliar peace of Mr. Humphrey's home. You'd think starting over at 66 would feel like failure, but strangely, it didn't. It felt like breathing. I woke up that Monday to the soft clinking of dishes. The smell of coffee drifted up the stairs. It wasn't the coffee I used to drink. The brand was different. But the silence was familiar in a way I had forgotten silence could be. Downstairs, Humphrey was already dressed and flipping eggs on the skillet. "Morning," he said without looking up. "You like your eggs soft or firm?" I smiled. "I like them quiet," I said. He chuckled. After breakfast, I offered to do the dishes. He tried to wave me off, but I insisted. "I'm not a guest," I said. "I'm a grown woman. I pay my way." And I did. That afternoon, we went grocery shopping together, 2 carts, 2 separate lists. I didn't need much, some tea, a few apples, crackers, milk, the basics. At the checkout line, when the cashier asked if it was 1 order or 2, I looked straight at her and said, "Separate, please." It was a small thing, insignificant to the world, but to me, it was everything, because for the first time in years, I was paying for my own life again. Humphrey and I fell into a rhythm, unspoken but comfortable. He made breakfast, I made dinner. We split the grocery bills and kept track on a little notepad by the fridge. Nothing dramatic, nothing petty, just mutual respect. I cleaned the guest room once a week, washed my own sheets, and folded my own laundry. Not because anyone told me to, but because I could. And at night, when the news played on the TV, we'd sit in our chairs and talk. Not about money, not about family, just about little things. The way the weather felt strange this year. The flowers starting to bloom too early. A book he liked. A recipe I remembered. And I realized this was what peace felt like. My phone buzzed every day. Sometimes it rang. Sometimes it stayed silent. Always my son. Always some variation of the same message. "We miss you. The kids want to see you. I was wrong. Come home. The bills are piling up. I don't know how to fix this." I didn't answer all the time. And when I did, I kept it short. Because I wasn't ready to be pulled back into a life where I wasn't seen. One afternoon, while I was pruning some of Humphrey's gardenias out back, Gracie showed up on the porch, backpack on her shoulders, a little bouquet of dandelions in her hand. "Grandma," she said, her voice small, "are you mad at us?" My chest tightened. I knelt down and hugged her hard. "Never, sweetheart." "Then why aren't you home?" I needed space, grown-up space, to think and rest. She nodded like she understood, even though she was only 8. "Daddy cries sometimes. He thinks I don't hear." That stung, not because I wanted him to cry, but because I didn't. I wanted him to grow, to change. I wanted him to stop seeing me as the airbag for his broken decisions. That night I told Humphrey I might go back soon. He stirred his tea. "Are you ready?" "Not unless the rules change," I said. "I won't go back to being the one who fills in the holes. I'll help, but only if there's a plan." He nodded. "You don't owe anyone your savings, just your boundaries." That stuck with me, so I took out a piece of paper and started writing. Rules for returning if I choose to. Joint budget, every dollar tracked, everyone contributes. No more silent giving. Personal money stays personal. No more guilt, no more begging. Respect is non-negotiable. The next day, I called my son and asked to see him. Just him. No kids, no distractions, just 2 adults talking. We met in the park. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. His shoulders slumped. His face looked older. "I miss you," he said quietly. "I miss the version of you that saw me as a mother," I replied. He didn't argue. He just nodded. "I've been a fool," he admitted. "I didn't realize how much you did." "That's because I never made you realize," I said. "But that's over now." He sat with that for a while. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What happens now?" I handed him the paper. "These are the terms." He read them slowly. When he looked up, he didn't look angry. He looked relieved. "Okay," he said, "I can do this." "Then maybe," I said, standing, "we can start again, but I won't go back to being invisible." "You won't be," he said. We both knew time would tell, but at least now we were speaking the same language. I didn't move back immediately. I visited more often, dinner twice a week, then 3. I'd come by in the afternoon, help Gracie with homework, fold a load of laundry if I felt like it, but I always went back to Mr. Humphreys afterward, not because I was angry, but because I was building something stronger than forgiveness. I was building new terms. On one Wednesday night, I walked into the kitchen and saw the strangest thing. My son, cooking, real cooking, not heating up frozen pizza or tossing cereal in a bowl. He had an apron on. There were onions chopped on the counter, and he was stirring a pan. When he turned and saw me, he smiled awkwardly. "It's chicken piccata," he said. "Don't get too excited. I followed a YouTube video." I chuckled. "Smells good." And it did. That night, we all sat together. The kids giggled. My son asked about my book club. I didn't say much, just watched, observed. And then I saw it. He poured me a glass of water first. That used to be my job. Every meal, every table, every time. It was small, but it was the first time I felt seen. The changes weren't loud, they weren't showy, but they were there. He printed out a shared budget on the fridge. He handed me an envelope marked Mom's Personal with $300 cash. No questions asked. He started saying thank you more, not just in words, in actions. One afternoon while we were cleaning out the garage together, I found an old box labeled Mom's Stuff. Inside, my wedding photos, my old recipe book, a note Ryan had written me in 3rd grade. "You're my hero, Mom." I didn't say anything, but I saw my son pause, watch me. And then he said, "I don't know why I put that stuff in storage. It should have been in the living room." I didn't correct him. I just nodded and gently placed the photo of me and his father back on top. A week later, I walked into the kitchen and saw something even stranger than him cooking. There was a new mug sitting by the stove, a ceramic one. Simple, but on it, printed in bold letters, this home was built by her hands. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward it. That night, as we sat in the living room and the kids argued over the remote like always, he turned to me and asked softly, "Do you think we're better now?" I looked around. The lights were on, the bills were paid, no one was yelling, no one was begging, and for once, no one was invisible. "We're getting there," I said. Then quietly, he reached over and squeezed my hand. I never demanded an apology. I never needed fireworks. I just needed to know that everything I had poured into that home wasn't forgotten. That somewhere deep in his adult, distracted, overwhelmed heart, he still knew who built the foundation beneath his feet. These days, I sleep back in my own bed. I cook when I want to. I rest when I don't. No one questions me. I go to the grocery store and buy the brands I like. I take slow walks. I read mystery novels on the porch. Sometimes Gracie brings me dandelions again. Ryan brings me tea. And once in a while, on days I never expected, my son hugs me without saying a word. Those are the loudest moments of all. Tell me something. Have you ever had to quietly walk away from someone you loved, just to remind them you were never meant to be invisible? Drop your story in the comments, or just if you've ever felt unseen in your own family, you're not alone. We see you. We honor you. This story is yours too.